Hi, welcome back to Big Word Bible Studies. I am Tanya Dennis, and I'm so glad that you are joining us this season as we journey through the book of 2 Kings. Last night we talked about 2 Kings chapters 1 through 3. Now you might think it's only 3 chapters, there's not a lot to talk about. There's so much to talk about that I can't even fit it all into one little video. So you're going to have to go to my website where you can check out all the extra notes that encompass the geography and the little details and the nuances and the overchanges with 2nd Chronicles and all of these different things. You got to check it out. TanyaDennisBooks.com. Go on there. You can get the extra notes for this on the blog portion. If you go to the Big Word Bible Studies tab, you can download free study guides that go along with what we're talking about here. You can also check out old studies that we have done in past seasons, such as 1st and 2nd Samuel, Judges, things like that. So you'll want to check it out. Again, that's TanyaDennisBooks.com. Now let's get into this. We've got the first 3 chapters. We meet up with King Ahaziah, who is the king of Israel. He is the son of Ahab. You might remember him from 1 Kings. Ahab was married to Jezebel, and yeah, they were heavy into idolatry. Well, Ahaziah isn't so different from his parents. When he falls through a lattice, instead of asking God for help or going to the prophet Elijah to figure out what he can do, he sends messengers 40 miles away to the city of Ekron to inquire of their God there. He wants to know, am I going to live or am I going to die? Well, Elijah, of course, intercepts him and gives him a message. The messengers take this message back, saying, yes, you're going to die, we ran in this guy, this is what he said God said. So he goes back, or the messengers go back, they see him, he gets upset, wants to know what's going on, and then we have this fiery interchange between them. He keeps sending troops of 50 men and their commander off to get Elijah and bring him back to the palace. As soon as they come, Elijah basically burns them. They all go up in flames. Another troop comes, they go up in flames. Finally, the 3rd troop comes, and there's a difference there. There's a humility. Now, throughout these 3 chapters, we run into a number of different situations where it seems like the prophets are acting in a very, very harsh way. That they're just, okay, they're asking you to come to the palace. Okay, you're gone. Fire, smoke, everything. Okay, it sounds drastic, but there are very important points that need to be made here about God's holiness. These men, when they came to him, they kept saying, oh, man of God. Well, they didn't know what they were saying. They were saying man of God, meaning prophet or priest, but Elijah knew what it meant to be a man of God. He knew the power behind our God, the one true and living God, who is a consuming fire. And so as he confronted them, as they confronted him, there was a battle, because you have the people who don't believe in God or believe that God will share his throne with anyone else, and then you have the prophet who represents the one true and living God who will not share his throne with anyone. He's a very jealous God, and he needs to know that he sits on the throne of our hearts. So while a lot of these confrontations seem drastic, they're not. What was drastic was the fact that these people had seen the actions of God. They had seen proof that he was real and that he was powerful and that he was sovereign, and yet they turned their backs on him. In the face of such overwhelming evidence, they were still disrespectful. That is why, the harshness isn't in the fire as much as it is in the blatant disregard for who God is. So when you go onto the blog, you'll see these passages: Deuteronomy 4:24, 1 Kings 18:37 through 39. That's where Elijah called down the fire from God with a simple prayer and defeated over 400 prophets of Baal. Hebrews 12:28 and 29. All of these talk about the reverence that we need to have for God, because he is an all-consuming fire. And what was the reason that Ahaziah died? Because of his idolatry. That was the reason he would not survive, and that's the reason his kingdom would not survive. Now, after this, we have the very famous story of Elijah going up in the chariot of fire, and how he didn't die and he was taken up and ascended. And his disciple, his closest companion and servant, was Elisha. And so we learn in chapter 2 about the differences between Elijah and Elisha. There are some very interesting pieces here. Elijah, his name means son of thunder, and Elisha's name means my God saves. Elijah was very brazen and confrontational. Elisha, we will find out as we continue this study, was more of a quiet teacher, and he was a healer. He was one who brought restoration to the people. This parallels the relationship that we have between John the Baptist and Jesus Christ in the New Testament. John the Baptist was one who was kind of harsh and rough around the edges, but he got his message out there. He spoke in truth. And then Jesus came along once the nation was confronted with the truth and made aware of their brokenness. Jesus was able to heal them and bring them back together with restoration, with grace, and with peace. So there's some very interesting parallels here. Again, there's more on the website. I want to tell it all to you, but I just can't fit it into a short video. So, all right, so you got to go online, check it out, and see all the different ways that Elijah was like John the Baptist. And then, as we go through the study, we can compare, okay, well, is Elisha as much like Jesus as Elijah was like John the Baptist? And we'll discover that as we go through the next few chapters. Now, they went on a journey. They went from Gilgal to Bethel to Jericho to the Jordan River. All of this as they were leading up to Elisha's ascension. Each one of those places has a significance in the history of Israel and in the spiritual journey of Israel. So as they visited each of these places, they would have been reminded of their forefathers and what happened in these places, but also the contrast between what happens when you serve God and what happens when you chase after idols. There were great distinctions. Each one of these places had ups and they had downs. They had highs and they had lows. And as Elijah and Elisha were journeying through these, they must have remembered all of these things. They must have remembered, okay, we're going to have a new beginning and we're going to try again, but we can't forget the past. We can't forget what we've been through, so that we can truly, earnestly seek after God and follow Him wholeheartedly. Again, all of that's on the website. You got to check it out. Okay, so again, Gilgal, Bethel, Jericho, and the Jordan River. And each of these places had great significance. Now, after Elijah went up, the chariots came and he went up. Well, let me back up. He offered Elisha the opportunity to ask for one thing. This reminds me of Solomon. When Solomon became king, back in 2 Samuel, Solomon became king, and, not 2 Samuel, I'm sorry, 1 Kings. Solomon became king, and God told him, ask anything you want, and it will be granted to you. And Solomon asked for wisdom. It was a good choice. Now, here we have Elisha, and he's speaking with his mentor, Elijah. And Elijah says, listen, I can't promise you're going to get whatever you want, but ask me whatever it is that you will ask, and we'll see if God will grant that to you. So Elisha asked for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. He wanted to have God's spirit as it was in Elisha, but to a double degree. He wanted to make sure that he would not be able to lean to the left or to the right, but that he would fully follow God. And this request, it shows his humility, but it also shows that he was aware of how much he needed God. It shows the relationship that he had with Elijah. They had very much a father and son relationship, and the fact that he asked for a double portion reflects back on the inheritance laws of that time. At that time, when a father would die, the oldest son would get a double portion, and everyone else would get equal portions. So not everyone else, because the girls, of course, didn't get anything, but the sons would get their portions, but the oldest would get a double portion. So the oldest son, the firstborn son, would get twice as much as everybody else. Now, Elijah, of course, had other prophets who were following after him, other people who wanted to learn from him and learn to follow God. But Elisha, he was his firstborn spiritual son. He was the one closest to him. He was the one that he mentored the most. And so this request reflects on that relationship. It reflects on the close connection that these two men shared. And of course, when Elisha saw Elijah go up in the chariot, then that was his confirmation that he would in fact receive this. Problem was, not everybody else knew that he was receiving it, so they weren't quite ready to follow his leadership. When he returned to the other side of the Jordan, he saw all of the prophets and the sons of the prophets, and they had a little bit of a dispute over who was in charge and who really knew what was going on. And then Elisha was offered opportunities to prove that, to exhibit his authority, to prove that he had been granted this double portion from Elisha's spirit. He parted the Jordan River with Elijah's cloak. Then he purified the water. And then he confronted these kids, depending on which version of Scripture you read. At the end of chapter 2, 2 Kings chapter 2, there's an encounter, and depending on which version of scripture you read, it might say young boys, it might say youths, it might say sprite young lads. It depends on which version of scripture you use. But that term, well, some of them make it sound like these are little kids. You don't want to think of 5 to 8 year olds being mauled by bears. But that's okay, because these weren't 5 to 8 year olds. These were young youths, most likely between the ages of 15 and 30. They were old enough to know what they were doing, and that what they were doing was blasphemous in the sight of God. Now, again, we lose a lot of the context here when we are so far removed, socially, culturally, chronologically. We're so far removed from this that we do lose some of the context. So we have a misunderstanding of what youths might mean. We have a misunderstanding of bald head. Like, hey, go up, you bald head, go up, you bald head. What does that mean? To us, it doesn't mean a whole lot, because, well, it's kind of cool to be bald if you're doing it on purpose. And so we don't understand, is this really a terrible thing? Well, yes, it was. There are several passages in Scripture that talk about how baldness was a disgrace, that a head full of silver hair is a crown of glory, but baldness is a disgrace. In fact, it was often considered a sign of disease or leprosy or things like that. If people were disrespecting God, if they were not behaving properly, Scripture often says, well, then you might as well shave your head and show, evidence of your disgrace. Your disgrace might be inside, but if you shave your head, everyone will know that you are disgraced. So the fact that they were calling him this, it was a horrible name for them to call him, and it was a disgraceful, disrespectful name. But on top of that, they were old enough to know better, and then they kept saying, go up, go up. Well, to us, we're like, okay, big deal, But in that circumstance, in that scenario, so close to the time that Elijah had just gone up, basically what they were saying is, we don't want you or your God here. Leave. Go up. Get out of here so that we can live our own lives. Now, I have to remind you, these are people who lived in Israel. So they are telling the God of Israel that they want nothing to do with him. Now, when Elisha heard this, of course, he turns around, he confronts them, and then the bears come out and maul them and all of this. This was, again, it sounds harsh, but the fact of the matter is that their behavior was so unacceptable that this punishment was perfectly what it should have been. In fact, it probably should have been worse. But their blasphemy, their disrespect and disregard for God and his prophet were extreme. Way extreme. So after this, then, we get into chapter 3. So we've only covered 2 chapters. We've got one more to go. Okay, so in chapter 3, we have Jehoram takes over as king because Ahaziah has died. When he fell through the lattice and got hurt, he ended up dying. Jehoram was actually his brother. Ahaziah didn't have any sons, so when he died, the crown then went to his brother, who was also a son of Ahab. Now, when Ahab died, the king of Moab decided they were going to revolt. They had been paying taxes. The Israelites were supposed to annihilate all the Moabites. However, they didn't. Instead, they decided to strike up a deal. Okay, you give us 100,000 sheep and the wool of 100,000 goats every single year, and we'll let you live. So it was kind of like taxes. So they're paying, their sheep every year. Well, when Ahaz died, the king of Moab decided, this is a good time for us to stop doing this. So they stopped. Ahaziah didn't do anything about it because, well, he fell through the lattice and he had his own issues. So he didn't do anything about it. But when Jehoram came in, he decided, listen, we need our sheep back. We need our wool. Let's get back on this thing. He decides to get together with the king of Judah, and they're going to, there were actually 3 kings who all got together, and they're going to go attack Moab. They didn't think this through too well because after 7 days in the wilderness, they ran out of water. So they pray, and Elisha helps them. There are a whole lot of details in there. I wish I could tell you everything, but I can't. So Elisha helps them out. There's going to be rain, and when the rain comes, they're camped all around Moab. The rain comes. It comes through trenches. Wow, the squirrels are very aggressive out here today. Can you hear all these acorns crashing around me? Anyway, so God sends the rain. It comes down, goes in all these rivulets all the way around. And when the Moabites wake up, the sun is rising. And the way it looks, the sun's shining off the water, it looks red. So they believe that the three kings who had come to attack them have actually attacked one another in the night. And so they're thinking, woohoo, we get to plunder all of their goods. So they go running in. Well, of course, the kings didn't attack one another. It's just the sun shining off the water. And so as the Moabites run in unprepared, the others come down on them and attack them and, of course, win the battle. At the end of this, we see that the king of Moab, he's fighting, and as a last-ditch effort to gain favor from his God, he sacrifices his son. He sacrifices the crown prince, most likely to the god of Molech. He was, or the god named Molech, who was the god of Moab. This again shows us the horrible nature of these false gods, the horrible nature of idolatry, and how our God is supreme. He is supreme in all things. And so, wow, that was a lot. And I feel like I've been talking for a while, so I need to let you go. But I just want to thank you for joining us. I hope that you will stop by the website, leave some comments, let me know what you're thinking, email me with your prayer requests so that I can lift you up before our King. And then in 2 weeks, we'll be jumping into the next few chapters. So, yeah, thanks a bunch. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.